ring if you're ready to care. Oh, let's talk power, let's talk speed. Hosted by the one and only We Too Deep. Turn it up loud, feel the power in your seat. This is slapping me, yes, slapping me.
What is up, everybody? It is your boy We Too Deep, and we are back with another episode of the Slappin' Meat community show. And we got quite a lot, honestly, to talk about in the world of really pro wrestling. It's SummerSlam week. So, you know, we got 2 days of SummerSlam, Saturday, Sunday, upcoming. So that's going to be interesting. I'll be tuning in to that both nights to see what's going on as someone who, quite honestly, hasn't really been keeping up with the product. So everything's sort of moving to maybe... You know, we'll just go ahead and get this out. With SummerSlam, if you have YouTube TV, you can now, they finally added it. We knew it was coming, because I kind of thought they would wait to the end of August to give it to us, where YouTube TV could connect to the ESPN Unlimited without a need for a separate account. But we have it for SummerSlam. So if you have YouTube TV, there are instructions online on how to set it up. It's pretty easy. Just go on your app on your phone. Go to the sports settings, connect to ESPN, and then I think you have to, once you connect your YouTube TV to your ESPN, for now I think you still have to use the ESPN app and log in that way, but I think eventually the plan is, at least how I understand it, is we'll have like channels for ESPN Unlimited for like the WWE stuff. I don't know if that's if maybe they changed it or if I misunderstood it, but my understanding was that you should be able to use ESPN Unlimited through for YouTube TV on the YouTube TV app, but I could be wrong. But so that's out there. With that, we have a lot in the wrestling world going forward to talk about, and so let's get into it. I'm doing one thing that I completely forgot to do in the setup for this. I'm going to be playing some audios, and I forgot to put it in the program. So we will be doing that here. But before we jump into that audio, I want to jump into the rant of the week, which is going to be on a tweet that I saw on X. I guess we can call it a post now, not a tweet. That I saw on X the other day, over the weekend, from @PatrickWebb. I don't know how accurate this is, but it sounds realistic based on the research I've done outside of this. We've kind of talked about this concept for a minute, but it's something that I saw it and I was like, I need to rant on this because I have opinions on it. He says, breaking a new study. Now, he doesn't link the study. I wish when people do this, they would link the study right? But he says, breaking new study finds that a minimum wage worker in 1971 had a lifestyle affordability similar to someone making $100,000 in 2026. To break that down for those who don't understand it, what it's saying is that someone making minimum wage in 1971 was like $3.25, right? So someone working and making $3.25 an hour, 40 hours a week, in 1971 can afford the same amount of lifestyle, right? Groceries, housing, right? They had the same affordability as someone today. In order to have that same affordability, you would need to make $100,000. Now, we've already talked about this concept before. I told you the numbers that I had was that a single person living by themselves, depending on location, needed to make on average $100,000 to $106,000, right? So this study, this new data that comes out, proves what I've been saying. And so why this is a rant, why what I saw that this integral, I reposted it, I think on X and on Facebook. I screen grabbed it and put it on Facebook. And on Facebook, I put, yet the boomers will still call us lazy. There's a generational gap somewhere. So as we currently live, we have the boomers still hanging on. You have Gen X, and Gen X is really the generation getting the most screwed right now. Because in most generations, you have this expectation of being able to come into power and to run things, right? So Gen X is kind of getting screwed for what the boomers have been doing the last 50 years. And with the idea of thinking, well, at some point we would be able to take control. And we're not going to have a Generation X president. We're not really ever going to have Generation X congressmen or women or senators or anyone in the House or in political power in and of itself, because the boomers have sort of controlled it for 2 generations now. And so you're going to jump the boomers to the next president. More than likely, the next generation of president comes from will be the millennial generation. More than likely, assuming the 2 candidates that I think it's going to be are AOC and JD Vance, or even Marco Rubio would still be, I think, millennial. I believe. Either way, you're going to have your next president in 2028 will more than likely be a millennial. We're just going to skip over Gen X. And so Gen X is kind of going to be the forgotten generation. And I'm for 2 reasons. One, the boomers refuse to let go of power. But second, Gen X, if we're honest about Gen X did nothing different than the boomers. So what happened is the boomers came to life at a time around the 50s, right? The boomer generation starts around the 50s. And what happened in the 50s? Well, the economy post-World War II in the 50s was booming. This is where the white picket fence out in the suburbs became the American dream. And the economy was booming in the 50s. Just everything, like jobs was good, price was good. The 50s was a good time to live for most people. And because of that, the fruit of that is that the boomer generation was able to live off the fruits of that situation that they were able to grow up in. They were able to have this luxury and comfort and not necessarily have to worry about things. And the Gen X generation sort of grew up on the fringe of that, with that same ideology. Now, it was also the same ideology in those two generations of you go to work, you work hard, you don't complain, you do the job you have, you don't complain about the job you want. And I'm not saying everything in that generation was necessarily bad, but it was a different culture, a different time. You were sort of expected to live a certain way. And then we have the millennial generation. And the millennial generation is now the generation that's about to come into power. And most of them are sort of zoned out, don't really care about politics. Though there's some that are. And then you have, but also with that, they sort of also, because of how good the 50s, realistically, the 60s were good. Realistically, the 60s gave us, the boomers gave us the Summer of Love, the hippie movement, mass drug use, drug culture, a whole different bunch, music kind of change. You got different genres of music that fit within that counterculture, and really the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and even into the 80s, life was, for the most part, pretty comfortable. And so you have about three generations: boomers, boomers, Gen X, and millennials. Who, well, the millennial generation doesn't start until late 90s. So you have two generations. Actually, I think I'm wrong there. There's so many different maps. Let me look up the generational map or years chart. Okay, let's see. The boomers, 46 to 64. Gen X is 65 to 79. Millennial generation is 80 to 94. And then Gen Z is, so 95. That's what this is saying. Yeah, so your millennial generation started in the 80s. So realistically, so I was right. Realistically, you have three generations: boomers, Gen X, millennials, who lived in a very comfortable state. They didn't have to worry from, not saying that everything was perfect, but for the most part, the economy was good. Life was okay. You could go out and do things that you typically enjoyed. You could afford rent. You can afford to live. Realistically, the problems we have economically really don't start until the early 2000s. Excuse me. And so it is the Gen Z and Gen Alpha generation. So Gen Z by this chart that I'm looking at started in 95. Right? So the Gen Z generation, which at this point, if it started in 95, the Gen Z generation would be the oldest one would be turning 31 this year. It's crazy. That is crazy. And they're the ones that ultimately are going to have to pay the longest for this divide. And so that's where the rant really starts. I had to set the context. But the rant really starts here, now that we have the context laid, that you'll have boomers, you'll have Gen Xers, you'll have even millennials who look down at Gen Z, Gen Alpha, anyone born really after like mid-90s, and say, y'all are lazy, you don't want to work, blah, 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 because they don't have a house. And I don't think they truly understand the actual, I don't think the boomer generation actually understands. And this isn't me just boomer hating, right? But I genuinely don't think that there's an understanding in that generation of the differences in the economies and in the way of life, and how that affects, for example, I forgot the name. There's a website. If you check out Zachary Faust, I don't agree with everything he says on everything. I don't agree with some of his conclusions on why he thinks things are the way they are. I have opinions on that, but that's not what we're talking about. But I genuinely think he has some genuine good information at times. More specifically, he's a realtor, and he's been one for a while, and he's a pretty dang good one. So he understands how to read housing data, and that's really one of the biggest areas of concern for me, and for other people who are, looking at, like, is housing ever going to become affordable again? And he, on one of his podcasts, episode 92 of his podcast from last week, he went through the housing data. And I don't remember everything, and I don't remember the website he used, but the average rent today is like the average rent. Now, this is just average across the country. The average rent's about $1,700. Depending on where you live, that price is going to be, if it's in New York, it's probably closer to the average. It's probably close to $2,000 to $3,000. Same thing with a place like California, right? But the average rent in America is around $1,700 to $1,800 a month. Now, just 6 years ago, in 2020, the average rent in America for the same type of living situation, 2 bedrooms, I think, is what they consider average, right? The average rent for that same rentable space in just 6 years ago in 2020 and before was under $1,000 or around $1,000. Much more affordable. Mortgages are the same way. Rates are the same way. And it's all leaning towards the only people who get rich out of this are the asset owners, the owners of property. It's all a giant scam, in my opinion. And that's my rant. That's my rant for it. Like genuinely, like, I can't tell you. I turned 29 on Friday. And I can't tell you how many times I've been told, "Oh, you're still living at home. You must be lazy. You need to get another job. You need to grind. You need to hustle." And there are 2 different things that I feel on that. First is no. There's a generational gap of you don't understand what's going on as far as expenses. But secondly, no. There's also, I believe, in my generation and younger, a generational difference in terms of what it means for work-life balance. I said, in the boomer Gen X generation, it was like grind until you were tired, and you just worked all day, and you worked yourself to death. And as the generations passed, a lot of people have decided, like Ben Shapiro even has this, like, you should never retire. You should just work till you die. And my generation has a different concept of, like, work-life balance. Like, that's much more important to my generation and younger of, I'm going to put in my 40 hours a week, and then I'm going to go home, and I'm going to relax, and I'm going to enjoy some hobbies, and I'm going to, try to do the best that I can, because, life kind of sucks right now, right? And I think that there's a difference between, like, there's a time for work and a time for rest. And it's just, I think, generationally, just a different mentality of what it means to work. We also, the younger generations also have much more technology that they have access to, and that I don't think the older generations actually are comfortable using. Or they see it as, oh, you just want to, in their generation, it would have been considered crazy to want to, stream and just do streaming for a job. And now you can just get on the internet if you have good content to make. You could literally just get on the internet and make good money just playing video games and streaming online, or right. And even like the concept of me doing this podcast, with the hope, with the reasonable understanding that I may not get popular or rich because of this, but there's always that opportunity that it could happen. And so this type of mentality, the more I actually feel like millennial, Gen Z, Gen Alpha generation is a little bit more entrepreneurial than the Gen X and the Boomers, in that a lot of them, specifically Gen X, sort of bought the lie of going to work your way up the corporate ladder and never really own your own business. Like, they want it to, we're never going to do anything that takes risk to go out and start something. Not everyone, but I think genuinely the Gen Z, Gen Alpha generations are kind of more entrepreneurial, F the system, we're not going to be a pawn in the system mentality. And I think that's why those generations are, I think a lot of it is also they're just tired of, they see the result of what living for the system and living within the system and following the system. They see that result, and that everything is just getting piled on them. And so they're trying to break free from that system. I think that's what Gen Z, Gen Alpha is trying to do. I don't know if it's going to work. Yeah, just this post, every time I see that stat, it just blows my mind because some people will read that stat and be like, or they'll see something along the lines of, they'll see like someone like AOC, who's campaigning right now, and basically she's now the forefront because Bernie couldn't get it done in the last 10 years. They're now putting AOC as sort of the one in task to do it, of trying to get a livable wage federally. And old boomers will see that and say, oh, they're late. Remember, like, think back to the Caroline Leavitt, Jesse Waters clip that I played a couple episodes ago. Now, I genuinely don't believe neither of those two believe any of what they said, but they know their audience is old boomers who watch Fox News, and they know their audience, and they know what they think, so they're going to appease them, right? But I just, if you think back to that clip, like, a boomer will see that, or see AOC wanting a livable wage, which, by the way, I'm more inclined to believe that. I don't agree with the process that AOC believes that should happen. I believe it should be not government mandated, but rather companies should just volunteer better wages and better working environments voluntarily, not forcefully. That's a whole different conversation. But I do believe that housing prices have gone up, interest rates have gone up, car prices, the cost of living has gone up. The only thing that hasn't gone up is the wages. The federal minimum wage has been $7.25, I think, since like the early 2000s. Now other states have started raising the minimum wage. But I do believe that we have to have these conversations about, like, what do we do? There's only two options. You either lower the cost of living or you raise the wage. Or the third option is you do nothing and you have a economy that's controlled by the 1% wealthy that own the 99% who don't have any money. And that's essentially where this is becoming, to where, just even think about it, like, making $100,000 a year is nothing to laugh at. But that only buys you, like, we could think of this from like a perspective of someone who, was born in the early 90s, bought into this systemic idea that if I just get through high school, go to college, get a 4-year degree, possibly a master's, master a field, go to work, and they've now put in 10, 15 years in that field, thinking that they're going to get 6-figure salaries and that they're going to be able to live lavish. And then you come and find out that, well, you bought into that and you have all this college debt and you're making $100,000 a year, and you can only afford what a minimum wage worker would make in 1971. You can just barely survive. Right? And so I think even now, like, the upper middle class is now starting to be affected by this economy. And maybe that's what makes a change. I don't know. I don't have insight into that, but I think that it's an interesting thing to look at and contemplate. Not much of a rant, but more of a discussion, right? Maybe, what do you guys think on that topic? I'm going to not bore you anymore because I beat that to a pulp. I'm going to try to do this without messing everything up. Bear with me while I add this audio source. Let's... my question with this, and I want to preface this real quick, is I want to talk real quick on two little small subjects on AEW's most recent pay-per-view. Just got two questions. First off, what is this? This is where this audio clip comes from. Is what is going on with Mick Foley here? And then we'll talk about the second thing here in a second. But just listen to, this is Mick Foley live on AEW Redemption Television.
Bow wow. Bow wow. Whoopple. Bow. Wow. Bow down. Bow. Bow. Bowing.
I'm sorry. I refuse to be lectured by AEW fans about poor WWE programming, and then they just sort of sit there. Now, I've seen some complain about it, and some talk about it, and some say it's cringy. But I guarantee you, if WWE would have had someone doing this, and if you did, I wish I can show you the clip. He's surrounded by Megan Bain and her partner. I can't think of her name right now. And he's making those noises. And I just, first off, what has gotten into Mick Foley? Like, you came to AEW to do that? Come on now, Mick. But secondly, like, I'm not going to be lectured about poor programming when you dedicate time to that. But the main thing I want to ask about this pay-per-view, and about all pay-per-views in general with AEW, is why Tony Khan continuously feels the need to put out 6-hour pay-per-views every single time there's a pay-per-view. And some of them are even longer. I want to know the reason. Like, what is his thinking of, 6 hours, that's the sweet spot. It's not. WWE has actually managed to get the sweet spot of the average watcher. About 4 hours is about as long as most people are willing to put up with. Just realistically, because I've seen people complain that are AEW fans that these programs are way too long. So those are just the two things that I really wanted. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time talking about the show because I didn't watch it, don't really necessarily care about it. I just, honestly, if Junkyard James wouldn't have sent me this clip, I wouldn't have even cared about it. If I'm being honest. I would have never known. I wouldn't care. I mean, I saw another clip of Jericho and Tommaso Ciampa fighting, and Jericho's now, because he can't wrestle anymore, he can't put on solid matches just doing what he normally does. He's now resorted to the hardcore stuff. And he, drilled Tommaso Ciampa, which is crazy. Ciampa, you leave WWE and you go to lose to Chris Jericho by having a drill go into your face. I don't know about you, but I got questions. But let's move on because we got a lot to talk about. Some smaller topics first, and then we're going to predict SummerSlam. Some smaller news things. WWE is now partnering with Sirius XM. To where if I understand it correctly, they're going to have the normal programming, the podcasts and stuff. Busted Open will be a part of it. But if I understand it correctly, starting this weekend, you can listen, if you're driving in your car and you can't watch the show, I think they're going to have a separate commentary team of Booker T and Vic Joseph on Sirius XM, sort of color commentating, as if you were listening to the PLE. That's cool, dude. That's absolutely cool. And I wonder how that goes. I hope someone, we see a clip of that, of what that sounds like. The next thing is Mike Santana has, officially signed with NXT, and so because of that, I don't know why complaints happen every time this happens. Because of that, he has to change his name. First off, Mike Santana is his birth name. We all know WWE doesn't allow birth names anymore. But secondly, it's his indie name, and if he wants to own the rights to it when he no longer works for WWE, if he wants to go by Mike Santana again, well, he has to change his name because WWE is going to copyright everything with him on the program. We've been through this. Every new signing that comes with WWE, we know this happens. Thirdly, he chose the name. I've seen people complaining, JD from NY being one of them, oh no, because the news came out that they applied for a trademark, and everyone sort of just started assuming it was him. He then later said it was him, but his name is now Cruz Montana. I like the name. I don't think it's bad. But he said he chose the name. And here's all I need to know. He chose the name. Therefore, I'm not going to complain about it. I don't think it's bad. He himself has okayed the name. It has meaning to him. So I'm just going to rock with it. I don't know why that's such a hard thing, why we got to complain about name changes every time it happens. And then... So those are the two sort of news things. A little bit bigger conversational piece. I want to ask this question. Is WWE doing a lot of competing with AEW events a good strategy? What I mean by that is Heatwave, NXT Heatwave, on August 30th is going up against All Out. And then Worlds Collide in September is going out against All In. And that one's unique in that it's competing not only on the same night at the same time, but in the same city. And so you'll have Worlds Collide and All In Chicago, I believe it's September 5th. Or something like that. And so that's an interesting thing. And then WrestleMania weekend, Mania we know is in Saudi Arabia, but there's been conversation about, well, what's going to happen, WrestleMania week as far as other events, because that's typically WrestleMania week, all the big indie shows go to the same city Mania's in, but no one's going to afford Saudi, or can afford Saudi. And so there's no real event on during Mania time. Mania is going to be 8 o'clock at night there, so it's going to be a day Mania here. And so there's just a whole lot of things of like what's going to happen during the night of those. Tony Khan has been contemplating putting on a show, and then WWE comes out and beats him to it with Stand and Deliver and another AAA show. So you'll have Night 1 and Night 2 will have something following it, I'm assuming, and one of that's Stand and Deliver. A couple things that I've realized, these are all NXT events competing against, or NXT and AAA events competing against AEW. I think there's multiple reasons for that. One, it's just one of those things where, like, oh, if we lose the ratings war, if CW doesn't get a lot of viewers for Heatwave or Worlds Collide, they could just say, well, it's because it's the third brand. It's the developmental. We weren't actually competing. And so I think that's the major reason for that. I just find it interesting. Is it a good strategy is my question that I had, though. My answer for that is no. I don't think it's a good strategy. Because I don't think that this is how you get... Like I don't think there's a single person who's considered watching any of the AEW stuff that and it's down-hard AEW fan that's going to look and say, now that there's competition, the next show they have is All Out. It's going up against Heatwave. I don't think there's a single person who has already considered August 30th, I'm watching All Out. I don't think a single one of them will make up their mind now and say, there's Heatwave, I'm going to watch that. Because Heatwave can, especially since Heatwave is on live TV, on program television, I can record it and watch it the next day. Right? And so, I genuinely, I don't know, like, what the plan is in doing this. I don't think it's a good business strategy. So, there's that. But let's talk about the actual wrestling happening this week. We got SummerSlam. WWE has announced the cards for each night, so we can predict the cards for each night, and then we'll send this thing home with the question of the week. So we'll start with night 1. We'll just go down as it was printed up. So we start with the main event. CM Punk versus Cody Rhodes for the Undisputed WWE Championship. This is an interesting situation because one of them's turning heel, and I think it's going to be CM Punk. And I think CM Punk is going to retain the title, post this event. That's just, I meant to say this is predictions of someone who hasn't paid attention to the main roster since the last pay-per-view. And I didn't even watch the last pay-per-view because that was Saudi. So it's been since what? Backlash? No, I'm kidding. It's been since Backlash since I've watched the programming, main roster. So I'm going to go CM Punk to win there. Women's World Champion Liv versus Io. I'm going to go the title change here and say Io Sky wins this match. We have Obo versus Brock Lesnar in a Hell in a Cell, which is 100% opening the show. 100% opening the show. I think this is the main event worthy match. And I'll be 100% with you. It wouldn't surprise me if it is the main event. Because I don't think Cody versus Punk is a main event caliber match. I don't know what the feud is and all those details. But of all the matches on this card, the one that I think means the most to me is Oba versus Brock 3 in the Hell in a Cell. Especially if this is going to be Brock's go-away show in his hometown with people who, are going to be buzzing just for him because he's from Minnesota. 100%. He's losing, and he's retiring. I would make this the main event. And it would not surprise me if it doesn't start the show. The only other place it belongs is the main event. I personally would start with Cody versus Punk. I would start with that match. Do everything else. And then do this Hell in a Cell to end the night. That's what I would personally do. But Oba Femi's winning. We got Gunther versus Nick Aldis. This is the second match. There's 3 matches on this card. This is number 2 that I really care about. Oba Brock is one of them. This is number 2. Gunther versus Nick Aldis is going to be a banger. It's going to be Nick Aldis' first match in WWE and probably his last match. I wish this extended further because I think you could involve Mickie James. Gunther's wife is a former, now retired wrestler, Jayne. Jayne. She was part of NXT UK when it first started, right before COVID. She was really good there. If she would want to come back for one match, I think you can 100% extend this further to having a mixed tag match down the line with Jayne and Gunther versus Nick Aldis and Mickie James. I think that would be fun. But I'm not sure if that's the way they're going. Either way, part of me wants Nick Aldis to win. But I just can't see a world in where they have Gunther put him over. I just don't see a world where they have Gunther put him over. I just don't. This is one of those where, either way, I don't know if the result is going to do anything for anyone. Because if you have Aldis lose, well, there has to be some form of punishment. And maybe there is indelt into the story. Maybe he can't be a GM or whatever again. I don't know. But if Gunther loses, he just lost to the boss in his first match in the company, I don't know. I feel like this is one of those complicated situations. Next, you have the Usos and Jacob Fatu versus Royce, Key, LA Knight, Solo Sikoa, and solely just because Solo's on the team, I'm picking Solo Sikoa's team. I don't like the Usos. I like Jacob Fatu. Yeah, it's crazy. 10 years ago, the Usos were my favorite act in the tag team division. I can't stand Jey Uso now. And Jimmy just don't do nothing. This match, really what it comes down to, this should have just been Jacob versus Solo again. Because the other two, there's got to be some form of interference. Is Solo going to bring out some new MFTs? What's going on here? I don't know. This match is kind of stupid to me. As far as the pairing for Solo's team. Just kind of random and stupid. But simply because Solo is one of my favorite on the roster, I'm going to pick Team Solo. And then Fatal Influence, Jacy, Jayne, Lainey, Reid, Fallon, Henley versus the Bellas and Paige. Not for the titles. It's just a 6-woman match. I'm picking Fatal Influence. Don't see a reason for them to lose. At all. I think this is where the Bellas turn on Paige. And we kickstart, maybe put Paige into a world title picture or an IC title. Speaking of that, Why they take the belt off my girl Sol Ruka? I don't watch Raw no more, but I saw that clip, and that's why I don't watch Raw. Anyway, night 2, we're going to end with that match. But night 2, we have a ladder match for the Women's Championship between Charlotte, Jade, Chelsea, Tiffany Stratton, and I believe it's the winner of Julia versus Lash Legend is going to get the last spot in that match. The website I got this card from says mystery opponent, but Wikipedia says the winner of Julia versus Lash Legend. I'm going to go with Wikipedia there. If that's the case, I think we're going to go Julia. Doesn't matter about it because neither of them are going to win. My prediction is this. Actually, I think it's going to be Lash Legend. And I think it's going to be Lash Legend because Lash and Jade, I think, are going to get into it. Tiffany and Chelsea, I think, are going to definitely get into it. And then that leaves Charlotte Flair to be the champion. I think Charlotte will win the belt as sort of an interim. And then when Rhea comes back, that can set up Charlotte versus Rhea for all the marbles at a big event. Charlotte versus Rhea 3, in that trilogy of that, I think that's what maybe they're headed towards. That could be a good Mania match, by the way, if they want to draw that out that long. But we'll go there. Number 1 contender. This is an interesting match to have a match for the number 1 contendership on a PLE. Finn Balor versus Sami Zayn. Because we all hate Sami Zayn here, we all going for Finn Balor, so that's the answer. Though part of me, I'm sorry, Kara, thinks Sami's going to win this. But maybe this is Sami's chance to get back to the championship. I'm still holding on to that's going to be the thing, and Sami's going to win the belt in Saudi. I'm leaning again because he lost the title so quickly. I'm leaning again that Sami's going to win Money in the Bank. And so I think Finn Balor will win here. I think we'll get Finn versus CM Punk as a quick feud leading into Money in the Bank where Sami will win. Sami will start chasing Punk, and Sami Zayn will beat Punk by cash-in at Saudi. That's my now prediction for what's going to happen. Trick versus Baron Corbin is a match I don't think anyone wanted for. This should have been Trick Mello. I don't know what we're doing. Trick's winning the match 100%. Penta versus Chad Gable for the IC title. Guys, this is Minnesota. I think this might be the match that starts the show. One, is going to be fast-paced. But second, you get that crowd jumping early with the Chad Gable victory in his hometown. Chad Gable's getting the payoff in Minnesota. Chad Gable's winning 100%. And then you get Dominic versus Danhausen. Winner gets the $100,000 that Danhausen stole from the Judgment Day. Danhausen's winning. And Danhausen's winning by some kind of shenanigans. Whether it's Big Cass, I know that they set his debut for the 3rd, which will be Monday after. Whether it's Big Cass, whether it's Enzo, whether it's something else, whether it's the Mini-Hausens, again, I don't know, but it's going to be Danhausen. Come on now. And then the surefire main event of night 2 will be Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins, a match that I personally have been waiting for. It should have been at the height of the Bloodline era. We should have gotten this match. We've been waiting for this feud, this fallout from the Shield. There's a lot of history in this, just the names on paper alone. Like, I don't know the current feud and what they've been saying to each other because I haven't been watching the product. But it sells itself. And this is probably going to be the best match of the 2 nights. And Roman Reigns is going to leave champion. And That's just how it's going to be. Roman Reigns is going to leave champion. And that's how we end it. So that's how we end our predictions. So let's end this with... Actually, I was going to do a question of the week. I'm going to say no. Not today. I don't really have one. I just looked at my notes and realized I didn't have one. So we'll just end the show here. Not the longest show, not the greatest show. But let me know what you all think. I know it was simply just like SummerSlam predictions, but that's what we got so far. Training camp starts this week if you're an NFL fan. So as more comes out of that, maybe we'll get some more predictions. With that, more talking about sports. If you're a baseball fan, trade deadline week is this week. But outside of that, thank you all for watching and listening. And like, share, subscribe, all that hoo-ha, and tell your friends. And until the next episode, I'll see you again right here on the Slap and Meat Community Show.
So hit that subscribe, come along for the ride, whether it's NXT or NFL time. Going in the ropes and forth and deep, slapping meat community every Tuesday. Affordability, every Tuesday, every Tuesday. Affordability, every Tuesday.